everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Kayla. This is my book review series where I cover books from a variety of genres. I mostly focus on like YA novels and mystery and horror and those kind of novels. I'm trying to also kind of broaden my horizons a little bit, so if you'd love to follow me on that journey and kind of hear the books I like and hear me talk about some of the ones I don't really like and just kind of hear my thoughts on things, give me a subscribe if you'd like, or whatever. You don't have to, but you can do what you want, you know what I mean? You know how YouTube works. Also, please leave any book review suggestions or your thoughts on the books that I cover in the comments. I would love to hear from you guys and, you know, I don't know, talk, have a little chat, have a little discussion, you know what I mean? This week I am going to be reading The Death of Mrs. Westaway by Ruth Ware. So I've already read a Ware book. I did it a couple weeks ago. Maybe it was one of my first videos on this channel. Also, I'll link it somewhere maybe. And I really loved that book. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. It was really good. And I thought going into this that I would obviously love the book because it's still, you know, Ruth Ware's writing. But I didn't think I would love it as much as I did love The Turn of the Key, and I actually love this book a lot more than The Turn of the Key. Like this book was very, very good, so I'm really excited to get into the discussion and to talk about what I liked. This is going to be spoiler filled, so if you haven't read this book, don't watch this, because you know you go in with a very limited knowledge going into this book, you know what I mean? If you've read the little synopsis, it's a very limited amount of information you get going into it, so I'm just making it spoilers so I can talk about what goes on in the book. So one thing I thought was cool was that Ware has kind of been praised as like the next Agatha Christie, and while I haven't read any Christie yet, I know, you're rolling your eyes, but I am very excited to get into her if it's as good or as better than Ware, and if she's, you know, grew up reading Agatha Christie, you know, Christie has to be really good. But something I really liked is that Ware actually references Agatha Christie in this book. Like, she's walking through the forest and she's like, oh, stop pretending, Hal. This isn't like some Agatha Christie novel, which I thought was a little nod at her, which I thought was really cool. All right, so let's go ahead and get into the novel. So right out of the gate, as I mentioned before, I was very intrigued by this book. I loved Ruth Ware. I love horror, mystery, suspense, solving crime, those kind of novels. Those really intrigue me because I love to try to guess who it is or guess the twists and turns before they happen. The way Ware is able to, as far as I've known, write these horror mystery novels that always leave you hanging on to a thread, like you're in suspense until the very last part of the book. She has multiple leads, a couple misdirects in there, and then interesting, intriguing characters. It's so good. I loved this book, and you're about to hear me rave about it because my hands are so... Anywho, this was a novel I simply didn't want to put down, and sometimes with books I find myself dragging a little bit, or I find myself struggling with like retention and trying to keep up reading for long periods of time. But with this book, I really didn't feel that way. I've been trying to get back into reading, and this was a good book for that. I would reread certain parts of the book over and over again, not because I didn't understand it, but because I wanted to read it again because it just excited me so much. This is a really good, like, chill kind of mystery novel where there's not too much action until the end. It's just kind of, it's a slow burn, but it's really good at also keeping you intrigued, and at every corner there's like some secret you find out about a family member or about Hal herself, the main character. It's very entertaining. Like, I'm a sucker for a book about mysteries and secrets and affairs of these like really famous or rich families that, you know, have some dirty little skeletons in their closet, you know, and you find out that they're not as perfect as they're, you know, chalked up to be. And I love, so far Ware is really, she likes like her big houses that have like secrets in them, with, you know, the smart house and The Turn of the Key, and then with this estate, the starts with the T, I don't know how to pronounce it, that estate where she has to, you know what I'm talking about, the house in this book. Hal, the main character, is actually incredibly likable, or at least you understand her to me. Like, she is someone who has always struggled with money. Her mom has always struggled with money. She just always seems to be down on her luck, living paycheck to paycheck, and she just is struggling monetarily and money-wise. I don't know if that's the right word for it. Add on the grief from her mother passing and not really having an answer as to how it happened. It was just, you know, she's a tarot card reader who's supposed to be not supposed to be able to see the future, but she uses the future to help her cope with things. And she didn't see her, you know, her mom passed, you know what I mean? Like, that is heartbreaking. And then you add on the layer of her having this, like, that creepy guy who came into her shop and was like, hey, you gotta pay up this rent that you owe me. Not rent, this loan that she had handed out, or she took out. She constantly has to pay more and more and more and more money. You know, it's incredibly stressful because this guy has, like, the ins and outs of people all over the pier, all over the city. He has the police around his finger, you know what I mean? So she stands no chance against this guy. And, you know, her money issues and the grief of her mother and wanting to, or needing some sort of money. You know, she needs money to keep surviving. And she, for a little part of her, wants to have a family, you know what I mean? Which both of those things create a very interesting, it creates a motive for her to continue the story, which is, you know, to get she needs the money. So it creates a reason for her to go to the house and to try to unfortunately scam the Westaway family. And also, I love the way how we found out that Hal had made this deal. It, you know, it just started with this creepy guy coming into her shop, and through the dialogue we kind of figure out that he wants something from her, but it's not till after that we realize what happened. You know, it's a great instance of showing and not telling. You've heard that all the time. Show, not tell. You know, it's always good to show. Don't tell me, I want to see it. And she did tell you at the end, like, how we got to that point, but it was cool that you're just introduced to this guy. She's seeing customers come in and out, and then she sees this guy, and you think it's just a customer, and then, you know, you see her kind of tense up and we start to realize who this guy is, that he has some history with her. It's really cool. So at the beginning of this book, I had kind of guessed that Hal was going to somehow end up related to the Westaway family. It's a common thing in mystery books, or at least the ones that I read, to have some sort of secret familial relationship. Like, if you haven't read The Turn of the Key, I'm not going to spoil anything, but, like, this, you know, is also, of course, the main character who is, these people think I'm related to them, they have the same name, and they think I'm someone else. Like, of course she was going to be related. But I don't think me guessing that or me knowing that took away from the book at all. It was still interesting to see how we got there. You know, and all of the other twists in the book, I didn't catch at all. I didn't pick them up, I'm going to be honest. I am not the best at picking up those kind of things and guessing it, but this one I had a hunch. And I really love the letters from Hal's mother, or let me clarify, from Maggie. So because of the confusion between Maggie and Maud, I think is how you pronounce her name, I'm going to be referring to them as either Maggie or Maud, just because, you know, if I say Hal's mother, you're kind of like, her birth mother or the one who raised her, you know what I mean? So Maggie I'll refer to, you know, the one who gave birth to her, and then Maud is her mother, even though up until like halfway through the book, or till the very end, Hal thought her mother's name was Maggie. I'm going to be referring to them as their names that we find out they are, you know what I mean? You know what I'm saying? You understand? Okay. So I guess I'd kind of had a hunch or figured out that the person writing these letters was Maggie's mother, was Hal's mother, the names, was Maggie, because she was talking about tarot card, and she was a tarot card reader, a fortune teller, and, you know, we learned from Hal that she is taught all these things by her mother. So I thought, I don't know, it just made sense. And then when she started, like, calling her, like, referring to Maud and referring to all these, like, Harding and Ezra and Axel and all these names, or not Axel, what's his name? The other brother, whatever his name is. I started to be like, oh, so she is related, and not just related distantly, like her mom lived there at some point or something. Like, she's connected in more ways than we think she is, which I thought was very interesting. I mean, in these letters, we get to see Maggie going through a horrible situation of abuse. You know, she's heavily abused mentally and physically by this family. She is pregnant and in a house that's not forgiving of that, and she is suffering from the loss of both of her parents. You know, it's really heartbreaking to see how much her mother went through to give birth to her. And unfortunately, you know, she never made it out. You know, she, with the revelation that she was killed by Ezra, you know, her cousin, but also the person she was in love with, you know, the father of her child. It was heartbreaking. And then through those letters, finding out that Maggie was the one who wrote "Help Me" on the window, it was just so sad. And you know, Ezra killed her in the boathouse in the exact same part of the lake was her body where they, you know, fell in love, you know, when she started to realize she was falling in love with Ezra. It was just, so sad, so sad. And I love the parallels that both Maggie and Hal were foreigners in this house. They were, you know, new people to this family and trying to navigate through it, and, you know, not kindly welcomed. Obviously Maggie to a more extreme degree, but they were both not welcome, both in the same room in the attic. And, you know, and they were both hiding a big secret from their family members, with, you know, Maggie hiding her pregnancy and who the father was, and Hal hiding that, you know, she's trying to deceive this family of, you know, really being their family member, you know, when she thought she wasn't, you know what I mean, but she is, but she thought she was deceiving them, that she wasn't her family. The books, or the letters in the book, get more frequent as time goes on until they eventually just stop. Once around where Hal finds the notebook and starts reading the letters, that's kind of where they stop. And I would find myself going back and rereading letters over and over again, because I wanted to read it again, knowing the twist, or knowing that Ezra was her father, knowing this and that. And it was cool to read them and to see what Maggie was going through living in that house. Like the way Ware wrote the letters, or Maggie wrote the letters, but Ware wrote it, you know what I mean? Having both Ezra and Ed so close together, I really thought it couldn't be Ezra, because his name was right there. He never called him Ed before. And I figured it was Edward, you know, like she put Edward in there purposely for you to think it was him, you know, the misdirect. And that she put in that plot of Edward cheating on Harding in the past, you know, to be like, well, if he's cheated once, that's what you're thinking. If he cheated once, he can do it again, you know what I mean? Like, for a second, I really thought it was Edward, because it kind of made sense. And to say like, oh, well, she was looking at the cameraman, and Ezra was right there. You know, they even said that Ezra was the one taking the picture when she asked, like, oh, who's my father? He's probably the one taking the picture. He said Ezra. And you're like, oh, but it's not, you know, like Ezra's in the picture, so it can't be Ezra. It was just so good. I was enjoying it so much. I have been saying he cheated on Harding the entire time, but it's Abel. Axel Abel. The names are confusing, you know what I mean? Edward was cheating on the boy, you know what I mean? So I'm going to mention right now two things that have to kind of deal with Hal's internal thoughts and, you know, how she thinks through things. There's gonna be one thing I liked and one thing I didn't like. So starting with the thing I didn't really care for was how Hal had like this, that was a lot of vowels, this like internal thought in her head, like voice in her head. She didn't know if it was their mother or if it was her, yada yada yada. I just frankly myself don't really care for that. It's just a preference thing. It's like, oh, this voice in my head is guiding me along, you know what I mean? It's okay if you're like processing through things and just thinking in your head, but having this like a thought, like this voice in your head that's kind of leads you to somewhere, and you're kind of fighting with your voice in the inner head. Personally, I don't care for it. I think it could have been done well. She did it well. It's something I don't care for. Say it with me. I don't care for it. Okay. Anywho. Okay, so now on to the thing that I liked. So Hal uses her tarot card reading skills a lot in the book to kind of guide her along her way or to figure out how to read people and how to like deceive people, and eventually find out the mystery of who her father is and all that jazz. She remembers tips and tricks that Maud, the woman who raised her, would tell her about how to read people and how to stay calm in situations where you're trying to like find out information from each other, and most importantly, how to not get obsessed with the fate of things and understand that this is not the end all be all that you think it is. You can't really tell the future. You can just use readings and stuff to help you make decisions in your life. It wasn't fate, which I thought was really cool, with the revelation that Maggie and Maud kind of switched places, and that Maggie was the one who believed so wholeheartedly in tarot, and Maud was the one who didn't believe in it, and that they switched places. Maud was still taking up what Maggie had taught her and using it to teach, I say their daughter because it was their daughter, you know what I mean? Like they both were born. Maggie had her and Maud raised her. They're both her daughter, or she's both of their daughters. How many times am I going to say daughter? Oh my gosh! Okay, sorry. There's a part in the book that I found really interesting where it's basically talking about how, so Maggie, her birth mother, practiced tarot. She believed in using the future to help you make choices in the present. Whereas Maud, there's this line where she basically says, there's nothing you can't learn from history that will teach you how to live your present. Maud used the past to affect her decisions, and Maggie used the future. It was just two different ways, it was just a cool parallel that I found while reading in the book that I thought was super cool, especially knowing that they flip-flopped, and that Maud used both tactics to teach Hal just how to follow her instincts, you know what I mean? This came in handy time and time again for Hal, when she was just trying to get the grips on her surroundings and try to figure out the mystery of it all, and just try to stay grounded while figuring out she has this whole family that is tied up in affairs and of murder. The dynamic between the Westaway family and the people who had grown up in the family their entire life was very intriguing to me. Their broken relationship with their mother, and also Miss Warren, who took care of her mother for so long. Harding, Ezra, and Axel. Is it Abel? Axel? Abel. I think it's Abel. I feel like Cain and Abel. Okay. Abel. They were all kind of hated by their mother, which is why Hal being named as getting the sole inheritor of the whole entire estate was kind of shocking to them, but also not to Ezra, which we find out why later. He was, because he's killed her or whatever, it's fine. Not his mother, but you know what I mean. They have no interest in remaining in contact with their mother, so when she dies, none of them really care that much, except for Harding, who believes he was due or owed the estate and the money that Hal is now given. It was a majorly dysfunctional family full of a bunch of rich kids who really never had to struggle for food or anything really in their life, but have all these deep dark secrets and deep dark trauma from this house that they haven't really talked about or handled well. And we find out later that despite completely despising her son Ezra in a certain way, both Miss Warren and their mother kept the secret for 20 years that he killed their cousin, the woman that he was supposed to be in love with. He killed her and buried her, or not buried her, he let her body go in the lake. So they kept that secret for so long. Eventually I think it got too much for Miss Warren, and she tried to warn Hal to get out, and try to save her, and that's probably what got her killed, unfortunately. Both women kept Ezra's secret for 20 years solely because he was family and he was blood, which is horrifyingly, it's scary that you would keep a secret like that because they're your family member. Oh no. And it's cool to know that maybe, Miss Warren wasn't so cruel just because she was an evil person, that maybe she saw something dark and scary in Ezra, but the other kids as well, and maybe she was trying to be so mean that she would scare Hal off. just thought it add a little nuance to her, a little level to her, a little complexity. Obviously she was mean and she was scary and evil, but she was scary. And you know, when Hal starts to question like who's out to get her, her immediate thought is Miss Warren, because she's the big scary lady who's so mean, who's always been here, and none of the kids really care about her mother's death, so she's like, Miss Warren's the only one that really seems to care about it, so she's like, maybe it's her. You know, I was thinking that. I was like, maybe it's the person who actually cares about it, not like Ezra was the kind of standoffish, like, I don't really care about it, it's fine, I'm the cool brother, and it ended up being him. You know, it was like a little misdirect, The way that they revealed that Ezra was Hal's father was also very brilliant, I found, you know, with the initials. Ezra was the one to say they shouldn't fight the inheritance or the contract or the will or whatever it was. You know, I thought he lured Hal into a false sense of security. He was the only one to call her by a nickname. He was the only one to call her Hal. Everyone else called her Harriet. And he was the only one to not fight the will as hard as everybody else was. You know, she connected to him the most, you know, thought like, oh, he's cool, you know what I mean? And he ended up, you know, taking her on that trip and, you know, letting it slip that he said, oh, well, your mother, what a shame she was killed in front of her own house, where he would have no idea how to know that because it wasn't in any of the papers. Hal didn't tell him, you know, so she only realized after the fact that he slipped up. And he might not even have noticed it himself. Maybe he did a little bit, but he was trying to play it off, and she didn't realize it till afterwards. And she was going through that scrapbook and starting to put together that Ed was Ezra Daniel, you know, the initials, because she saw Al, Abel something, I think it was, I don't know. It was just cool how it all led up to something, you know, because I remember reading the letters and being like, who is this Ed guy? You know what I mean? Like, who is Al? Like, who are these people? Because we don't meet them in the present. And then, you know, to reveal that it was just their initials as a way to hide who they were. You know what I mean? I thought it was cool. And, you know, for a second, you know, she kind of thought that Abel was her father as well. Because, you know, she knew that her father had blue eyes. You know, brown eyes meet blue, or dark eyes meet blue, or whatever. And Abel had blue eyes, and he had that line where he's like, well, do whatever you want, you know, I'm not your father. You know, I didn't read into that as much as Hal did, but it was still a cool misdirect, you know, for a second, because she starts to think maybe it's him. On that note, Ware does a really good job at making the main character think that she's crazy. You know, there's all these things like the rope on the staircase, or, you know, the noises in the house, or the locked bolt on the door where she thought she was locked in. She does a really good job at making the main character question her sanity. Like, there were so many times where Hal was like, oh, you're just reading into it. There's nothing wrong, you know, stop psyching yourself up, you know, there's nothing going on. Whereas she really had a reason to feel that way, but Ware does really good at making the character think they're crazy and kind of like gaslighting them a little bit. And, you know, Hal, it's not talked much in the book, but Hal had a little anger over her mother, Maud, for making her believe she was Maggie and not telling her what had really happened. And, you know, finding out that the reason why Maud was killed was because she was going to tell Hal, was just heartbreaking, because she was so close to telling her, and then Ezra had to go and mess everything up, and now Hal never got to tell her it was okay, that she would have forgiven her, that she understood, and, you know, like she said that in the book. It was just sad. Ezra, I hate you. You were one of my favorite characters too, which I think was really good. You got, like, Ware got me to love him, and then nope. And, you know, eventually how the ending all ended at the boathouse, you know, the same place where they fell in love, the same place where Ezra killed Maggie, you know, it all ended there where Maggie's body was. You know, Ezra died and his body was sunk down into the same exact place Maggie's body was dumped. You know, it's karma. It is karma, Ezra. So, haha, sucks to be you. Alright, so I'm just going to mention this quickly and we're going to move on. But Ezra flirting with Hal before he knew who she was I didn't like that. That was gross. That was so gross. And it was creepy and it was scary. It was already scary that he was flirting with her in the beginning, and then finding out that they were actually related, and then finding out that he was her father was like, ugh. Oh no, oh my goodness gracious. So we're gonna move on from that. Gross. Gross. There's always some incest in these books. Always. 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 And it's like, oh, please don't. Okay, so another thing, I say one thing a lot. I really love a good slow burn, and I think Ware loves them too. A lot of the book was dedicated to Hal just kind of getting her surroundings and like kind of trying to figure out what was going on and meeting new people and getting a read on them, you know, her tarot card reading. It didn't really wrap up until like the very end of the book, which I really appreciated, you know what I mean? That there's so many little pieces that you're getting built up until you finally find out what's happened at the end. I love a good slow burn if it's done well. And again, she managed to not let me get bored, which I appreciated. You know, there was a lot of character building and setup, which I thought made the ending pay off very well. It was very enjoyable. Ware is really good at setting up the mystery and making things seem very normal when you first read them, and then them paying off at the end, which I know it was a misdirect, but like the conversation at the boathouse with her and, was it Harding? One of the brothers, and just like the little things, the initials, it was just, you're reading these letters and not really meaning anything, and then you see them at the end and then it all makes sense. I love that. However, the ending tripped me up so hard when I first read it. I read it so many times trying to figure out what I was reading. She calls Maud and Maggie both mom at certain parts of the end, and it was just like, there were so many names in general with the entire family that I was kind of confused. I was confused about the photograph because she says she sees Maggie and she sees herself in Maggie. Like, she says she looks just like her. So I was like, oh, well then Maggie's her mom. And then later on she says that Maud, you know, the person that's growing up, looks just like her mother. And I was like, but you just said Maggie looks just like her. But then I took a step back and realized when she's talking about Maggie, she's saying that Maggie looks just like her and her physical, you know what I mean? Looks just like her, so that she was her birth mother, and then Maud looked just like the woman who raised her, not necessarily like her. It was just like, it rattled my brain. Once I got that concept, it was okay. I figured it out. But I was so confused, and I thought it was a plot hole at first, but no. I just didn't read it correctly. In the end, there's also no clear conclusion on what Hal is going to do with the money, or what she's going to do about the guy who keeps asking her to pay up, or about the pier, about anything. You know, I guess she's found a community, a family, and, you know, the remaining relatives that didn't try to kill her or get murdered. You know, she has a family now with Mitzi, and he's married to Harding. Yeah, sorry, it's a little fuzzy. You know, they're gonna help her get back on her feet and, you know, just be the family that she's never had, that she's always wanted. It was cute. I loved it. Alright, so the last thing I'm going to talk about before I wrap this up, the ending, is Mitzi. I loved her character. She was so sweet, and she was taking care of all their kids, and there were funny scenes where she would like be talking to the kids and kind of ignoring Hal, and then once Hal, you know, offered to give up her inheritance just to not cause drama, I think she gained a really big appreciation for her, and, you know, was like, oh no, sweetie, we're not going to let you do that. You know, you're owed this just because we're all giving you grief. You know, you're still owed it. And she was always right by her side. She was one of the few people by her bedside when she woke up, swearing to give her a place to stay until she got up back on her feet. I love Mitzi. She was cool. I loved her. She was great, and you can totally see like Hal becoming like, I always try to call Hal Maggie. Hal becoming like a really good aunt to her kids, or their cousins. No, their aunt. Yeah, their aunt. No, aunt, cousin. I don't know how familiar relationships work, but you know. Anyway, I think it'd be cute. I love it. So Mitzi was my favorite character. Period. Alright, so that was my conclusion of the book. It was kind of all over the place, and I kind of went off my script a lot, but hey, that was my review. I gave this 5 out of 5 stars, which I also gave The Turn of the Key 5 out of 5 stars. So far, I know some people are not the biggest fan of Ware. Like, everyone has mixed reviews. Some people love it, some people don't, whatever. The 2 books I've read, I've heavily enjoyed. I think I like the conclusion of this book much more than The Turn of the Key, but it was still good. I'll link that video somewhere. Ooh, I popped my knuckles. Alright. Thank you for watching. Again, remember to subscribe, hit the bell, like, whatever, if you enjoyed it, if you liked it, if you want to see more from me. I think I'm going to, so I put the TBR of what I was going to do, and I did some of those books, but now I think I'm going to start doing an in-depth little analysis of the Harry Potter books, because I love the Harry Potter books, and I'm really excited. They're on my shelf, and I'm really excited to do it. So, all right, bye. I love you. See you later.